Okay, so hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Default Global. This is where we connect with global first entrepreneurs and remote work experts from all around the world to share their experience and knowledge in the remote work and global hiring space. So our guest today is Siobhan McKeown, a CEO at Human Made. Siobhan, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Siobhan, as someone with an impressive background in remote work, I'm excited to have you here on this show today, and I would like you to make just maybe a brief introduction, a few words about yourself, about your experience, and maybe about your current role and the company itself.
Sure. So my name is Siobhan. I'm the CEO of Human Made. We're a remote web development agency, and we also have a hosting platform called Altus. I have been working remotely for about 13 years now. Started out going freelance back in 2010, worked for various companies as a writer. I worked for WordPress for a couple of years on the WordPress open source project and was an open source contributor. And then joined Human Made about between 7 and 8 years ago. Initially, I was organizing events, and then I took over as director of people operations, and then eventually transitioned into COO. But my focus has been, I guess, growing, building, nurturing remote teams. I'm really interested in remote work. I wrote a book about remote work, which was published in 2019. So it misses the whole pandemic. It feels like it needs another chapter. But about,
right.
The experience of remote work and also the impact that it's having on society as well. Human Made. We are about 70 people at the minute. We are distributed across around 24 countries around the world. We don't have any head office or anything, so we're all fully remote, and we always have been. So that's always been, part of the reason I'm here is that I love to work with remote teams. I love the challenge of it.
Okay, sounds good. And in your role as CEO of Human Made, it is clear that the company itself has been successful in providing digital solutions to brands like TechCrunch, right, Capgemini, USA Today, and while at the same time being a fully distributed company, like you said, right? So, can you share with us some of the key strategies your company has implemented for efficient international hiring and probably for distributed team management?
Yeah, so in terms of hiring, a good recruitment tool. Whenever I took over my role, we were using Trello, and it was just not ideal for hiring. We use Workable at Human Made, but there's loads of really great recruitment tools. So a tool that allows your team to be autonomous and self-service, so that your hiring managers can kind of lead through the process themselves with support from you. That reduces the need for people to be in the same time zone, because you can get on and do the hiring work. I think so these are good practices for a remote or a co-located company. Setting really clear expectations with hiring managers and agreeing the process before you set out on it, and agreeing who's going to do what at each stage. And then I think something that's really important for remote is to use different techniques to assess different aspects of remote work. So we use text interviews, email interviews to assess people's written skills, because that's really important. We're communicating in Slack all of the time. We're communicating on blogs, and you have to be able to communicate through text. Almost more important for some roles than being able to communicate, through video or voice chat, is being able to communicate through text. So we assess that through as well. And then again, in terms of building teams, you've got to do that also at all sorts of different levels. So we rely heavily on communication tools. We use Slack for general chit chat and synchronous stuff. We use GitHub and internal blogs for asynchronous communication. Especially while our teams are somewhat located geographically, we'll often find little clusters together of similar teams, and then we have teams servicing different regions. When we communicate as a whole company, we have to be able to do that asynchronously and be able to communicate across time zones. So we have blogs and things for that. And we rely on things like our company retreats and meetups to build those social bonds. So they're really important as well.
Okay, sounds good. And in one of your blog posts about human-made values, you discussed this importance of acting with kindness, right? Especially in a remote work environment, right? So with that, can you share some practical maybe tips for fostering a culture of kindness in distributed teams across different time zones, different cultures, I mean, maybe even different continents?
Yep. Yeah, we have people across different continents for sure.
Okay.
It's really about building that awareness of cultural differences. You don't have to know what all of the differences are, but you have to be sensitive to the fact that cultural differences do exist.
Okay.
And so the way that you feel about what someone has written or said might be the result of a clash of two cultures or a miscommunication, not necessarily the intention or what was said in the first place. So I always say that you should default to assuming best intentions with one another. Because we can't know about in detail about the cultural nuances of every country that is represented at the company, especially as we keep growing. But we can be aware that there are differences, and so our own position is relative to the positions of other cultural positions of other people in the company, and we have to keep that in mind. And one way is not necessarily better than another way. It might just seem more objectively true to me because I've been in culture to do that. So I think keeping that in mind. I think part of that is creating space for people to feel they can ask questions and ask for clarity. There's no stupid questions. I mean, it's a bit of a cliche to say that, but we want to be able to understand one another. So you have to make it okay to ask questions all of the time. And I think then also normalizing asynchronous communication as a way for people to connect is really helpful as well. Some people who don't have English as a first language sometimes struggle in that sort of more quick fire, like synchronous, like everything is happening very quickly all of the time. And when you can have different layers and speeds of communication, then you can create ways for people to interact and engage. So I think that's really important as well. And I guess there's the time zone side of things. So sharing that accountability for who's staying up late and who's getting up early. We try to keep our work, respect people's working hours. If people just want to work a 9 to 5, that's fine. But sometimes you will need to, like, occasionally I'll be up at 5 to be, speaking to people on the other side of the world, and that's fine. And we share but it doesn't happen very often. We sort of share the accountability for that. So it's not following on the same people all the time to have to be doing. Those are some things that we sort of practically do.
Okay. And in the same blog post, you mentioned something about psychological safety, right? You said something that psychological safety is an essential aspect of company values, right? And can you talk more about this? And what does it mean, like a psychological safety for employees, right? Specifically in your company, right? And for distributed teams, and how to build this psychological safety environment.
Yeah, we want people to be able to bring all of themselves to bring all of themselves to work and to feel able to take risks and to be themselves. And, the company is way more a better environment and more innovative if people can do those types of things. And so we have to think about the way that people interact on all different levels. So we have a sort of social level, which is like creating connections. And I think sometimes when companies just go remote, they don't really think about how to replicate that, going for coffee after work or going for a drink or just like hanging out in the corridor. And so we do quite a lot of things like that. Like we have virtual coffee breaks to get people together. We have social channels. When we couldn't have a retreat, we had a virtual company retreats, and we have games that we play like Scribble and Type Racer and things like that. So it's just like you want to create that way of people connecting. So they see each other as people, not just like, typing or words that appear on a screen. So that's really important. We then have town halls, which are really open spaces where really everyone is encouraged to ask questions and also answer questions. So it's we don't want to create an environment where it's like one way of like, we have our executive team and people are asking questions and stuff is sort of mandated down. We want to be much more collaborative and again, no questions is a stupid question. Like we want to hear all of the questions and we want to discuss those and other people to bring their answers, even if they're like things that I don't agree with. We should definitely talk about those things. So we encourage those. Recently, so we're a services agency,
Right.
and recently, we've had an allocations model. We're sort of moving people around all of the time to fit the needs of our project, and we're currently transitioning to a more static model where we have squads, because we've realised that the model of moving people around all the time, it makes it difficult for teams to really form and have cohesion and go through all of those phases of actually becoming a team where you can have healthy conflict, you can support one another, your roles are really clearly defined. So that is a bit of a shift that we're going through at the minute, because we recognize that some level of stability is necessary for teams to create that psychological safety. And I guess like any company, issues happen, and it's really important when someone raises an issue to take it really seriously, and to address it, which we do. And our code of conduct is pretty explicit that you can't have retaliation. That's a rough code of conduct violation, and we really, that's really important that people have a safe, welcoming environment at work. So that is really important to myself and all of the other leaders in the company too.
Okay, that sounds good. You also mentioned that you have employees in 25 countries. Is that what you said?
I think it's 24 at the minute.
24? Okay. So anyway, can you share some maybe insights into your hiring practices, including maybe how the company selects maybe countries, for hiring, and how exactly you evaluate candidates for your distributed teams?
Yeah, it sort of evolved over the years. So our approach originally was just like, doesn't matter where you are, we'll hire you.
Right.
That was just our approach. And obviously then we had to, we can't employ everybody that work with us. So often we have contractors, like many remote companies.
Okay.
Blend of employees and contractors and other sort of mechanisms for recruiting people. We do, now we were a bit more intentional about, if we are growing in Asia Pacific, for example, we'll look in the Asia Pacific region and specific countries that we've hired, specifically in Japan or Singapore or Australia, and like aim to grow there. Obviously that comes with a lot of challenges because hiring practices are so different across the world, and there is sort of some things that are the same, but like it's very hard or almost impossible to have knowledge of all of the countries where you want to hire and the practices. So that's a challenge. But we do successfully hire. So I guess it's probably slower than it should be because we don't know as much about all of the countries. But yeah, I guess that's how we approach the sort of regional aspect of it.
Okay.
I guess another thing to keep that I do think about through the hiring process is, again, comes back to cultural differences and how that affects how someone will perform or interact through the hiring process. Like some countries are a lot more hierarchical, some countries are more informal, some, it's very different. And to try to keep that in mind. And that's part of the reason we have all of the different mechanisms for assessing whether someone's a good fit, because we're looking at, writing, whether they can write, to communicate, their technical skills, their communication skills through like verbal speaking. So there's lots of different ways to look at that.
Okay, got it. And you touched this, but I would like to go a bit deeper to this. So you have like teammates in 24 countries, right? And it means that you must navigate some various compliance considerations, right, when hiring and managing employee globally or teammates globally, right? Can you discuss how the company manages compliance in this context, right? So do you use some employer of record providers? Do you hire only through contracting, or you have your own entities in some specific regions, specific countries? Just can you give us some more details about it?
Yeah, so we have we're incorporated in the United Kingdom, United States, and Australia, but we also have a few branch offices as well. And then we also use contractors. So prior to when, through most of the life cycle of lifetime of Human Made, there hasn't been PEOs and companies like a Remote or Oyster or Deal in the way there are now, which are absolutely great. It's great. But we've got a bit more of like a patchwork just because of the way that we've grown. And also, just to be completely honest, it's quite expensive to hire through one of them. So
that's true.
Which works for a VC invested company, but not for a company that's sort of bootstrapped like agency. And yeah, compliance is one of the trickiest parts. And people ops is obviously taking a lot of that now, but we make it more difficult for ourselves because we want everyone at the company, wherever they're employed or whatever their employment status, to feel the same and to have the same experience and to feel like they're going to have the same protections and the same benefits as everybody else. So when we're writing contracts, we're trying to create parity across all of our contracts and all of our different legal entities. We're creating policies. We're trying to make sure that we're hitting our compliance requirements, while also making sure that there's parity. And then there's obviously places where there's things that we can't replicate. So the United States offers healthcare to everybody. We offer healthcare to people who don't have a national health service. That's as opposed to just offering a blanket. And in Australia, the superannuation, like their sort of pension type system, is like this 21% of salary, so it's massive. Which obviously we can't replicate and offer that to everybody else. So there's a sort of mix of pragmatism, plus always hitting the compliance needs, plus treating people equitably, which all sort of we try to pull together into what Human Made.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess it was in one of your podcasts, you said something about approaches that your company has in terms of team building and cultivating this sense of community among your teammates, right? Can you talk a bit about this? How does it work?
It's pretty tough, actually, and I think it's become tougher since the pandemic, because one thing we realized in the pandemic was how reliant we are on meeting up. We had an annual company retreat, we had meetups, we were very involved with the WordPress community, so we'd get together, like when people would go to WordCamps together, and so we actually spent a lot of time together in person. And then that just sort of stopped with the pandemic, and that made it really tough. Like we definitely were looking for other ways for us to connect, and that's when we introduced more things like virtual coffees and some virtual retreat things like that. I think we started to have our retreat again, which is great, and we're starting to like attend events together. I think you need to create a really strong sense of identity for your company. You have to have something that people want to be part of, like they want to be part of the story of the company, not just work there. And like if you create that sense of identity, which you can do online, it's different to doing it in an office. Then you create a greater sense of cohesion. But like I'm not going to lie, it is difficult for people in Asia Pacific because the center of gravity of Human Made is much more in Europe, and it is difficult for people in Asia Pacific because there's less chatter, there's less stuff going on, than there is in European time zones. And we do try to use asynchronous communication and things like to help with that, but it doesn't solve all the problems. So that is something we're working on an ongoing way. And again, this introduction of static teams is another way.
Okay.
Trying to improve.
I see. Okay, good. And probably my last question for today. Just based on your experience, with global hiring, with remote work, can you give some advice for founders who are just early into this process, maybe executives who are new to this remote work and global hiring stuff? What are maybe some 3 key considerations they should keep in mind before going global?
I'd say a big one is, the first one is remote work is not just taking your office and replicating it online, which a lot of people do. the pandemic. They were just like, okay, we're at that office now. We're just going to do the same.
Right.
And now we're online. It's a different ballgame.
It doesn't work. Yeah.
I mean, I guess you can grind through the work and get the work done, but you're not going to create that sense of engagement, commitment that you need to really have your employees like really performing and your business doing well. So I think you really have to think about that. And you are very lucky in that there's lots of really great like remote leaders who are writing something on the internet and doing podcasts and talking about things. And so learn from them. You know, there's obviously I've written a book about it. It's called Life Lived Remotely. Just going to plug my book, but there are others. There's Ali Green and Tamara Sanderson just published a book called Remote Works, which is a great one to get if you're thinking about going remote. There's the GitLab Handbook, which is a fantastic resource which every person who's doing remote work uses. And Human Made also has a public handbook, or handbook's been public for about 7 years, I think. So don't try and reinvent things. Learn from other people. I think the second thing is just think about the impact on your employees. You know, there are things that you're probably not going to think about too much. Like when you work remotely, it's very, very hard to create boundaries. And that can have a negative impact on the people who work for you. People struggle with isolation. You know, it throws up new challenges that you need to like take seriously and address through your culture and through your processes. And then I'd say the last thing is just, it's great. Like, it's really great. Like, lean into remote working. You can make it work. It's not some sort of thing that you're saddled with. It can be a massive benefit to your company, to your employees, and really encourage people to like learn more about it and you know, do it.
Okay, fantastic. So thanks a lot, Siobhan, for sharing your valuable insights on your company strategies and practices that you're currently using in your company. Yeah, it was really helpful. Thank you for taking the time, and speak soon.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Yeah, see you.